More than 2 months since the deadly assault on the U.S. Capitol, the FBI has released new video from that day in hopes of making more arrests. The video shows some of the mob's most vicious attacks. In one instance, rioters can be seen beating police with metal poles and overcoming officers to get into the building. CBS News senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge joins us now. She's been following the investigation from the start. Hi, Catherine. Great to see you. Why are these videos only coming out now?
Well, Tanya, I think in its simplest terms, it comes down to the issue of volume. The FBI has received over 270,000 digital media tips so far, as well as hundreds, if not thousands of hours of police body cam video. And there are two levels to the review. The first is with machine learning or artificial intelligence to kind of winnow down the stack. And then they have to bring in a human review to confirm the identification that's been made. And so we also have a third pot of individuals who go through that process, yet they still cannot figure out who they are, and that is why they're releasing this new video seeking the public's assistance. Let's walk through the videos one at a time. The first video, I think, is probably one of the most horrifying from the day. You can see the police officer with his head wedged between the doorway, and you can see the rioters trying to pull him from the helmet and the face shield. And if you listen closely, you can hear the groaning and the pain of the officers. Listen here. The groaning and the pain of the officer involved. If we go to the next video, this one has a suspect there in a plaid shirt, and you can see him with this large stick repeatedly beating the officer. And then if we go to the third video, this is an example of how they used different kind of aerosol sprays to distract and even hurt the officers involved. In this video, you see the individual using a fire extinguisher, but there's certainly other videos with the use of bear spray. Bear spray is especially important because at the velocity at which that spray comes out of the canister, it can be up to 70 miles an hour. So it can have the effect of the officer feeling like they were hit with a rubber bullet at close range. It can blind you, and it can cause severe respiratory inflammation, which may have been the case with one of the officers who died as a result of his injuries. So bottom line, the FBI is releasing this video, and despite the awesome tools they have to identify suspects, they still need the public's help to find these individuals who they say committed some of the most heinous and violent attacks against the officers that day.
Yeah, Catherine, it's very distressing to hear that some of these people are still at large when we know the investigation has resulted in numerous arrests at this point, and yet some of the rioters responsible for some of the worst violence, are still out there. What
Correct.
kind of progress overall is being made in the Capitol riot investigation, and how many arrests continue to be made?
Well, the current status of this case is over 300 arrests, but based on the court documents we reviewed here at CBS News, they're expecting another 100 suspects to be charged in the near future. And just to put this in perspective, this has shaped up to be one of the largest federal investigations in U.S. history. I think it's also worth noting the number of police officers and the arrests involved there. Just over 130 police officers were wounded as a result of the riots. 2 later died by suicide. And then the last officer, Capitol Hill police officer Brian Sicknick, died later from injuries he suffered and sustained during that attack. And those are just awesome numbers in the worst possible way as well, Tanya.
Horrifying, absolutely horrifying. And, Catherine, how many Capitol attackers had no known links to extremist groups prior to January 6th? And how is the government dealing with that? Is the government dealing with arrests from those who had links with these groups differently than those who had no known links?
Well, you're showing a lot of good insight here, Tanya, because one of the things that we have seen in our review of recent intelligence assessments is what law enforcement is identifying as a new threat vector. These are individuals who they characterize as opportunists. So they were not linked to any kind of organized group or militia on the day of the attack, but for some reason they were catalyzed to act in the moment. And if you think back to the post 9/11 days when American citizens were being radicalized by al-Qaeda or by ISIS, the biggest concern among law enforcement was the so-called lone wolf or lone actor. And what we have now, 2 decades later, is a similar scenario playing out. But in this case, it has to do with domestic extremism, Tanya.
So interesting. And Catherine, you obtained an intelligence assessment stating that there is still a threat in Washington, D.C. What can you tell us about that?
Well, we obtained this intelligence assessment here at CBS News. It was just completed a couple of days ago, and it's from a fusion center here in Washington. This is a group that takes intelligence that's classified, unclassified information, and all source intelligence to put together a list of options for decision makers. And it reads in part, DVE's domestic violent extremists will be a particular threat to the District of Columbia based on past activity, rhetoric, and persistent grievances related to national political developments, including D.C.-based institutions and individuals. And you can read in between the lines there, they're saying that there is a persistent threat, and it's a particular threat to Washington because the government is here, and of course, Capitol Hill is here as well.
And how will this, ongoing threat factor into the debate over security at the Capitol? We know that there are lawmakers who are eager to sort of lessen at least the overt appearance of a police state there, and others who deem it necessary. So where does that debate stand?
Well, I think this document is important for 2 reasons. Number one, it was done post an FBI and Homeland Security assessment on domestic violent extremism, so it has new information, and it also concurs with the finding that it believes this threat from domestic violent extremists will continue throughout 2021, and with a particular interest here in Washington, D.C. And the assessment goes on to say, because Washington is the way that it is, it's a place for free speech and for rallies and political events. This may present an opportunity for these lone actors or lone wolf to act out in very violent ways. So they see still this heightened threat environment, and they don't predict any let-up in the near future.
Catherine Herridge, thank you so much for sharing your fantastic reporting with us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.